Hey all. So, I know a lot of, or should I say not a lot. I know that not a lot of people ended up watching my prior videos on government, but they have been helpful for me, and eventually some people I'm sure are going to watch and benefit from them, so I am going to continue putting them out. Today's topic is the origins of American democracy and the Constitution. I try not to make my videos much larger than 10 minutes. In the past, when I've made these government videos, it's usually about a page of notes for every 10-minute video, and I made 3 pages of notes for this chapter. So we'll see how much I can get through. But if I don't get through everything in this 10-minute segment, I will have another segment tomorrow. So there's that. So this is based off of Chapter 2 in my textbook. I try to frame my notes mostly in my own words to avoid plagiarizing, especially since I am sharing mostly via my notes here. If some of the phrases seem very similar to those in the textbook, I just want to give credit to the textbook and say that that is where I drew my notes from. Okay, so let's start with the basics. First off, what is a constitution? A constitution is a nation's basic law. It establishes your political institutions, assigns and sometimes divides the powers of government, and it often provides certain guarantees or rights to citizens. And constitutions can be written or unwritten, or a combination of both. In America, people like to think it's a combination of both for a number of reasons. First, we obviously have our formal written constitution, but then the unwritten constitution is the set of cultural norms and ideologies that unite us as an American people and form a somewhat more informal component of our body of law. Alright, so this video might seem a little bit more like American history than American government, but it is focused around the documents that are political and governmental in nature from the Revolutionary period, so bear with me. And we begin with the following big idea question. What ideals contributed to the American Revolution? So life was pretty good in the mid-18th century, by mid-18th century standards, of course, in America. I mean, we were largely left alone. There were those laissez-faire economic policies on the part of the British. They pretty much trusted us. As long as we kept trading exclusively with them, things were fine. And then came the French and Indian War. Now, the war itself wasn't so bad, besides the fact that it was a war. It was a colonial war, in part. It was between France and Britain, and the part that took place in America, the colonists did get a little bit involved as well. So ultimately Britain won and gained a lot of territory, but unfortunately they also accumulated a great deal of debt. And this debt became a particular problem when Britain decided to levy taxes on the colonies. Britain saw this as only fair, considering that the colonies were the ones who supposedly benefited the most from the war's territorial gains. However, the colonists resented being taxed without direct representation in Parliament. They cried out, "No taxation without representation, darn it!" They probably didn't say that, but that was their general sentiment. So, in response to a great deal of taxes, the colonists levied boycotts and protests, and Britain responded with even further economic pressure and taxes. There was a long cycle. Ultimately, in July 1776, the First Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, which, you guessed it, declared the colonies were to be independent from their mother country of Great Britain. The primary purpose of this document was to announce and to justify the revolution to the colonists, so the audience was not the people in England, which could explain why, on July 4th, 1776, George III reportedly put in his journal, "Nothing of great importance happened on this day." Now let us explore to what extent Enlightenment thinking impacted the founding documents. So many of the Declaration's ideas were based firmly within Enlightenment philosophies, particularly those of Mr. John Locke, who believed in natural rights and a social contract. So he believed that government could only exist with the consent of the governed, and that it should be limited, that government was a necessary evil. The main responsibilities of government were to create standing laws, to promote the preservation of property. John Locke also felt, and this one would become particularly important, that in extreme cases, people have the right, and perhaps even the duty, to revolt if their needs were not being met and if injustices were, quote, deeply felt. The Declaration said that the people should rule, and that all were equal as individuals and had unalienable rights. These were ideas and notions that no prior government had been based on, but that a lot of Enlightenment thinkers have been talking about. The last thing we have to say about the Revolution and the Declaration of Independence today is that compared to later revolutions, the American one is generally regarded by modern-day thinkers as conservative. The colonists wanted independence, and they wanted to be governed with consent of the governed. And that was basically it. They generally saw little need, at least at first, I think that might have been subconsciously intentional because of the elitism inherent in some of these founding fathers' writings. Anyway, they generally saw little need, at least at first, for great social, economic, or political upheaval. The Articles of Confederation, which I guess we'll talk about tomorrow, were the provisional body of law established for the duration of the Revolution and shortly after it, and they well exemplified the colonists' initial desire for extremely limited government. Now, declaring independence announced that the Revolution was starting, it would take a war to finish it. And some would argue that in a sense, the American Revolution still continues to this day. But for us, this is where we're going to end off. So my Cornell Notes summary for today's work is as follows. Please ignore the screaming behind the door. Before the United States could form its own body of law, it needed to sever ties with its colonial rulers, a risky undertaking which was necessitated by certain unpopular mercantilist policies after the French and Indian War. The Enlightenment-inspired ideals of the Revolution, best summarized through the Declaration of Independence, stick with us today to a considerable extent. Thank you for your time.